Good evening, everyone. We all had a good day. We want to welcome you tonight. My name is Jocelyn Poirier. If you haven't heard that before, I'm Rugby Ontario's Rugby Development Manager. I want to start by welcoming everyone, saying thank you for attending our 7th installment of our 8-part webinar series, this one on competition, attack structure, and tactics. Before we get started today, I'll go over some housekeeping notes for us regarding our webinar format here. So as you'll see at the bottom of your screen, you have a Q&A, raise hand, and chat icon. The chat is disabled still for these sessions. The Q&A function will allow you to ask questions throughout the session. That sort of functions as our chat. Amanda will be joining us when she gets back today, so she'll be a little bit late. But she and I will be monitoring the questions coming in throughout the session. So throw anything in there if you like, and we'll help Ryan and Sean manage throughout. We will have each of the panelists' presentations and then some time for questions at the end as well. So if you've got questions specific to them, we can put them in throughout. If you've got some bigger questions, we'll have time to get to those at the end as well. If you have anything in there, I'll also share our link to our Jamboard that our panelists will be using throughout as well. So I'll throw that up into the Q&A. If someone can just put a question in there now, asking for it, we'll respond with that. All right, do our land acknowledgement to start us off. I just wanted to acknowledge that Rugby Ontario and our member clubs are situated on traditional Indigenous territories across the province. Rugby Ontario acknowledges that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory now called Ontario. We are thankful to the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who continue to contribute to the strength of Ontario and to all communities across the province. Today, I'm presenting from Gananoque, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples, and is covered by the Crawford Purchase of 1783. So Amanda's not here yet for me to throw over to her, but I will send it over to Ryan, can start us off. So our 2 panelists here tonight, we've got Sean Medeiros, who's the head coach of Brock University men's program and the former Rugby Ontario high performance coordinator. Many of you may have known him in that role. And Ryan Surgeon, who coaches across many different levels, high school, club, and provincial, with an assortment of teams. And he can tell you a bit more about that when he begins. So I'll end this. And Ryan, over to you.
Throwing it over, eh? That's it. Yeah, really excited to be here. Attacking stuff's always the best part of rugby anyways. Much as everyone likes tackling, it's much more fun to have the ball than to not have the ball. We got quick sharesies there. Just someone give me a thumbs up when it's all good to go. Perfect. So it's some attacking principles and ideas. I've started using the word shape instead of structure because I find that the kids and a lot of youth athletes, mostly U23s, get really confused and get really bogged down when you say there's a structure, as if there's something there's a box you have to play in, and that's the only way to make it happen. It works for some athletes, but for some athletes, we definitely want to make sure that they have a giant toolbox that they can grab whatever they want out of. And make that work for them. The outline for what I got going on tonight, right? A little quick outline. Goal of attacking, right? How do we do this? And then strategy objectives. There's 2 kind of pieces to an attacking shape. We have the pod, so how we organize the forwards in front of our second layer of attack. And then we have the standard concepts, and then their setups, and then similar for the shapes. So the full field shapes that we're looking for are in that next part. And then the big concepts that goes on with them, and then share some popular shapes and when to use them and when they're useful for you. So depending on your team and depending on the opposition team as well. And then how to implement these shapes is something that I'll touch on briefly, but really meant to give Sean a big and then a big hand over to him to really drive that one home. So the overall goal of attacking, right? We live in a game in rugby where our goal is to invade the opponent's territory and score sports points, right? We want the ref to give us more points than the other team, and the reason is we do that, and how we do that is to create as many one-on-ones as possible, right? So the defense will often say that they're trying to make unfair fights, And we're trying to make enough options and enough possibilities that they have to dedicate one person to one attacker at a time and give everyone else more space to use their skills on the field. And obviously, in accordance to that, we also have to win as many one-on-ones as possible, right? We have to use our pieces, so our players and athletes, as you have it effectively to maximize skills. That's not always the way to do it. If you have excellent athletes but low rugby IQ, there's certain shapes you can work in and certain ideas that you can work in to make it a little bit better. Really direct game plan, really hammer home basic skills, basic tactics, and really just beat them with effort. And as that next point says, effort and execution kind of functions as a force multiplier for your skills, right? So it's always good to have that max effort that you execute at all times, but we're really looking for those athletes to be able to do that as efficiently as possible so that they can be as game ready as possible at every single moment. The other points are there, just general attacking theory of putting athletes in place to be athletic. That's the shape and the pods that we set up are used mainly to just allow people to do things. It allows them to run fast, it allows them to pass, allows them to draw pass, all those basic skills that we talk about. And then providing that shape to maximize decision-making skills, right? Give them 2 options on every ball, give them a lot of time by creating depth and artificial depth through second layers, and really forcing that to give the attack as much time as possible to make those decisions. In that Jamboard, there's actually a few slides on decision making. I'm more curious about it. It's a selfish thing for me because I just read on my plane ride the Teacher's Guide to Coaching. So now I'm fascinated and enamored with how athletes and how their coaches teach decision making to athletes and why it's obviously incredibly important in attacking. So how to create those one-on-ones. Right, we want to make sure that the defense has to respect every single person involved in the attacking scheme and what we're doing, and give each athlete an equal access to affect the play and equal ability to try and attack and use their skills. Some general pod shapes that I'll be talking about tonight: arrowhead, a skewed arrowhead, linear and stacked, which is quite new; lateral, which is entirely new to me. So I learned about that one a few months ago, and then the edge channel attack, which is just how we use backs and forwards in conjunction in order to create those off-man and one-on-one battles in the edge. So outside 15 meters when the defense is at their most stretched. I'm a big one target guy for each skill. So in pod work, our one target is to win the outside shoulder, right? Force that defender to get a weak shoulder, which is when you can't make a dominant one-on-one tackle and they lose their one-on-one, right? So losing a one-on-one equates to you breaking the line, you being able to draw pass and put someone through shit space, them requiring more than one person to make a tackle on you, and that's all what I would call a win in the one-on-one scenario. Some constants that we work with inside when we try to do that and try to create these pods, because all they are is just an organization for athletes. They're not like a Bible, they're not a rule, they're not a hard set idea. They exist somewhere in that ethereal space of rugby being a fluid game. But as we get more structure and as we get more ideas, it changes a little bit. But almost always consists of a primary receiver and then an inside and outside support player. Right? Some schemes are running with 2 people in that dominant space. And then as you get higher and higher in the levels, so at U19 and U23, that inside support becomes much more effective than the outside support does. At a lower level at U16 competitive or at U18 competitive, that outside support makes the defense make a lot more questions and allows them to acquire more space. But at a lower level, at a higher level, that inside support is required to make sure you keep the ball, because the attack and the efficiency of the defense increases as you go up and up. That game driver, so that 9, 10, 15, whoever you have in the decision makings, needs to provide the directions and just extra space, but the players need to be allowed to express themselves within that space. So your goal is to get them to win the outside shoulder. How they do that is kind of up to them. We have the optimal design, but we need to make sure that it's pretty concrete. And the last one is just these creating shapes in space for more efficient setup. We just allow them to set up earlier so their mental load is decreased, so that when they get the ball, they have a much easier time making decisions. Right? We want them to decide as quickly as possible and then execute that skill. So scan, decide, execute. And that these shapes and these structures really just allow them to not worry about one phase of that process, which is setting up and where to go. So we'll get into those kinds of shapes now. The pretty basic one are the arrowheads. So that's pretty basic, right? We got our draw. Okay, perfect. We got our lead receiver here, right? Who's going in. Once again, they're trying to win that outside shoulder battle, right? 9's in the ruck, 3 of them. We got USA defending against the unnamed Canada players. And this is just a classic one. This is the diamond shape, right? We have 10 in the bucket or the pull pass, right? We have the outside attacker, then inside support. We find a lot of young athletes and new to the sport will take that inside line a little bit soft. So they'll try and go a little bit too far and then cut out, versus all we're trying to do is just check this man, right? Get him to come up, hit that line, and make sure that we can get through that space. This one's pretty basic, but it's pretty easy to teach. And it makes sense once you explain the other target aspects of what's going on. So we find that a lot of those athletes really draw them to that idea. And then it gives them a role, right? You have the inside support for clear out. You have outside support for keeping man outside, and also for that pop pass that goes outside. Then the one that's a little bit more common nowadays is the skewed one. We've just taken that triangle, we've just tilted it. So we've given the outside support a lot more space to try and find that outside shoulder in front of their defender. And then we've given the supporting player a little bit more time and a little bit more space to get to the outside in case that ends up being a thing. Right, because the primary receiver's goal is always to attack that third defender's outside shoulder and win that one-on-one battle and hold this outside defender to make sure that they try to defend against that man. And then these two, post and pillar, are normally defending against the 9 other inside options that you can create. Then we go on to linears, which this is a little bit more these are a little bit more entertaining in open play, not open play, sorry, but fast, like quick ball actions and quick ball settings. Because a lot of these players can run lines as they see fit, because they know that there's a first receiver, right, a primary one that often will get skipped and then become inside support, and then primary and then outside receiver as well, with still that option to make those pull passes to those 10s and create that full field setup that we're looking for. And that second layer attack is what we often talk about, as well as having the outside support to come around. These can often be run tighter as well. We can run these at like second defender, right? Because normally the defense is normally not as set up when we want to attack in a linear fashion. They're not really prepared for it. So, and having all those options to go, right? The quick pop pass to 9, from 9, I should say. That guy's running an ace line, which is just a hard inside line to hold these 3 defenders where they are and create a little bit more space outside. The evolution of that becomes the stack, right? Where the 9 pulls. They pull out from the behind the rock, engage these 2 defenders, and we have the inside ball, right, for that inside support, who still has to maintain their distance to the primary ball carrier, the quick pop that goes outside, and as well, we maintain that the 10 has his hips in line with the primary receiver, where at any time we can make sure that that's a good spacing to have and create that depth artificially. This stuff, the stack stuff is pretty new in the Premiership for England, is where I saw most of it. And then a little bit of around the corner quick ball action over the course of a few games. And then the newest one to me, right, which is the lateral wide pod, where all we're doing is try and maximize that space to get to the outside shoulder. So instead of that inside, that's inside support dropping back to here, we're making sure that they're just in line to hold these defenders a little bit longer, to give this attacking player a little bit more time with that ball in hand, and a little bit more time to get past that gain line and prevent these defenders from immediately swamping the ball or being that inside pursuit for them. So he's a little bit closer to any breakdown that would happen, but they get a little less time to make that choice, right? So this pod structure comes from pretty, I'd say, higher, more competitive teams, where that inside support, they have a lot less time to make that choice of where to go and where that ruck's going to be. But in both cases, right, instead of standing back here, they're up here, so they're closer to this ruck and they're closer to that ruck, but they just need the decision making in order to get there in time. And then lastly, we have our edge channel attack. This is when we've kind of exhausted our middle pods and now we're attacking the outside channel, since we've augmented the field a little bit and we're in that 15. We're just giving it one option. We've got that same stack. The same stack situation here, where these guys are connected a little bit at the hips. The 10 or prime receiver is just making that round ball. We have inside support from whoever's there. Then we have outside support who's very flat, right? Encouraging this defender to have to respect that space, right? He can't really go any further. He can't really sit here in order to respect that person, or else they're gone. This isn't a 15-meter pass, so I wouldn't be suggesting that. Any prop can do it, but we don't know about 10s. So we have to make sure that's imparted upon them. But the same stuff where this can be, this player here can be your 11, this player here can be your 13, it can be another 7, right? And then the pull pass comes from someone with a little bit more speed and a little bit more handling ability, because it ends up trying to create a massive 2-on-1 on the outside. That's pretty critical that they get right, because your inside and outside support will be pretty far away if you don't make those. And then we move on to how do we make these happen, right? So those are just examples of little pod shapes and how we organize forwards. There's not really a Bible on it yet, so it's all kind of figured out and people piecing together. These are just basic ideas for how we're going to put all those pods together, right? How we're going to work them together. And that comes from a rule of 2-2-2, right? So we're always allowed each ball carrier, so 9 first receiver, anyone who has the ball, right? 2 directions of attack, right? Either left or right of them, 2 layers, right? So we have that pull pass to support any blitzing defenses that are coming. We have an ability to get that and gain that depth back. And then 2 supporting players, right? Generally, we have a first receiver or a first arriving player whose job is to just blow that ruck up. Make sure we try and create as much havoc for the defense as possible. And then another supporting player that will either seal or make a choice depending on the defense that's there. One thing that I'd like to hammer home again is that the concept of opportunity override structure, right? We spend a lot of time putting these things into place, and we spend a lot of time thinking about it because it works perfectly until rugby happens, right? It looks really good on our whiteboard and looks really good in concept. And we need to empower those players to play what they see in front of them. We can't say this has to happen. We can go, yes, like that's a good suggestion, and yes, this is how we implement it, and this is how we use your space effectively. But at the end of the day, we're not on the field, so it's a tough one to get around. We can't really have silent players when we're playing in a shape, right? The silence will kill us in terms of lack of communication and just more people giving more information. And then the concept of only one player ever has the ball. So we need to be thinking a few phases in advance for these shapes to work. We need to make sure that the game driver has an idea, right? And the concept of players as lifeguards kind of disappears from the vernacular and from the ideas, right? So they're not just like watching the ruck, making sure no one drowns. We're getting around the corner. We're getting in our starting blocks. We're using good work off the ball. And that effort piece kind of comes into play there, and really got to find depth when we work in this kind of shape. So what do these shapes look like, right? What do they do and how do they work together? We'll start at the most basic, right? Which is just a simple 4-4. Like, so all we're doing is splitting the pack in half, however you see fit, however, socially they get along, or if they're really good teammates, or if they pass well. For this one to be effective for your team, you really only need 2 forwards who can pass, right? So at this point we have the 1 and the 3, because as we know, props can do anything. So they're leading those pods. And then this is just explanations and expanding of shapes that exist, right? So we have a skewed arrowhead here. We have a more traditional arrowhead there, right? With an ace line out here with that A who has a little bit more space out wide. These is really effective for you when you have a team with pretty low rugby IQ, where you just split them in half, and at training, you just put one in one color penny, one in another color penny, and they find each other. This is a very good entry level for U17 in general, because I think it just allows them to understand. It allows them that space to share, and then also it creates a lot of space out wide for your backs. If that's something your team really needs, is like you have very fast backs or good handling backs, but the forwards aren't there yet, then this creates a lot of space for the backs, because then they're not in the way, right? The forwards aren't mucking up whatever elaborate plans the backs have. And they can really effectively drive home any kind of decision making. This is probably the most popular one, which is the 1-3-3-1. Pretty critical and pretty formative in most pod systems or most shapes. With our 2 fast forwards on the wing, we'd like them to both be able to pass left and right effectively, but lots of wishes on that one. But we have those 3 forwards hanging in the middle with those 10s floating around. The 10 and 12 operate as pretty good decision makers, and they always kind of sit in those buckets. Really make sure those pods are congruent and kind of effective. They end up like really attacking the middle of the field is what we're looking to do to create that space out wide, right? We go back to those pods that we mentioned earlier. We'll use the arrowheads and the laterals and the flats to create that edge create that edge attacking system that we want, where we are exposing those last defenders on the outside to really hammer home that 1v1 mentality of you're going to beat the man in front of you. Then we move on to what was pretty unofficial in the All Blacks for a long time, but then they kind of, manifested it, but then more like really hammered home what this concept is of 2-4-2. This requires a lot of forwards who can pass effectively, because you need to interchange forwards in between to make those pull passes happen and to make those accurate passes happen over probably more than 5 or 7 meters. But they do a really good job of spreading the field. So if you're against a defense that isn't very mobile, or you're against a defense that can't read the field very well, then this is a pretty good option for you, because it allows your decision makers to really put people into space. So with those kinds of forwards in the middle, we can put the 10 here, we can put the 12 here, and then we can attack those outside channels and still create rucks on the outside for the 11s. And the fullbacks and the opposing winger as well. I really challenge that team to move around the field and try and defend everybody. But once again, a lot of interchange and a lot of passing in between forwards, which is something that's quite hard. But it kind of gives the 10 a lot more power to roll people around, which is fun. So players with high rugby IQ will probably really enjoy it. The 2-2-2 just across the field. It's just a more defined version of the 2-4-2. So we just give these forwards in the middle, just give them a little bit more idea and identity of what they're doing, right? So one pod will generally be a smash pod, where we're just trying to gain as much ground as possible, win those one-on-ones directly and confrontationally. And the other one will normally have a little bit wider situation where they're trying to spread the defense. Right, and then so all those pods can run off of 10 as well in those same organizations, in those same fashions. So like a lateral pod of just a drawn out bunch of forwards in front of that 12, in front of that behind that 10, really creating that space. This really allows us to put our very fast and very athletic forwards and hookers in those channels with a lot of space in front of them, right? So if we want to encourage like a lot of open play and open passing, this is a good option. And it's just a little bit less, it's less, they bunch up less than 2-4-2 in my experience, and giving them a concrete lane to work in, right? We have middle outside, so we have 4 lanes, and they can kind of operate that and be efficient in their attacking. But it's a lot of allowing them to find their own space, much like the 2-4-2. It just allows them to play a lot more in between each other, but still the defense has to respect what's going on the entire time. And then a little bit zanier, we have the 1-3-2-2, which is just the hybrid of the two. So we still want to have that forward and those forwards, attacking and really slamming up the middle. Making that game line, right, forcing those defenders to crunch on in. And then we have a little bit more mobile option out here with the four attackers split into 2 and 2. Right, they really have the option to go forward, and then the 8s on the inside as well. Normally it's just a back row forward, especially at high performance junior level. Those 6 foot tall mobile forwards who have a future in the tight 5 when they get promoted, and then when just allowing those guys with a little bit less size, but it's still more the athleticism, and we still want them in other parts of the field. So there's a lot more interchange between these pods and these experiences. So the 5 and the 3 pod here will have a lot more space to work up the middle and a lot more space inside those like 6 meter gaps, and then the same applies for the 6 and the 2. Then we have that edge case again with the 8. So that's just a way to organize everyone and make sure that we know what's going on. So it's really all the planning that we had for the shapes, covered most of it. But just to go back to our constants, right? Our attacking constants is to get those one-on-ones as fast as possible, right? So we want to get those people into shape and into an area where they can be effective. Versus what kind of happens in chaos rugby, where no one really knows what's going on and no one really has a defined role. And so for some athletes coming into rugby, it becomes very confusing and overwhelming. And then some people who have extremely high rugby IQ are frustrated because the other athletes on their team can't read what they're doing, because obviously no one has telekinesis just yet. But this is as close as we can get to that kind of mind reading, because we know with a well executed, well drilled team, we can make sure that they have a lot of space and a lot of time with the ball. And if we can rep through that, right? So as we go to, when we transition to Sean's portion about how we're going to implement this, we really put on that kind of action of we're going forward and we're trying to win those one-on-ones as much as possible. There you go. Big Q&A session then. A lot of push on you. Normally the coaching that we do would be a lot of pulling it out of you, but in a webinar format, much like attacking, the silence just kills me. So I don't want to do that.
So Ryan, we do have one question here.
Yeah.
About the lateral pod formation.
Sure.
Do you find entry angle at the breakdown is a challenge?
100%. That might be the strangest part of teaching this and coaching this through players, is that we kind of have to redefine and re-understand how the gate works, because the gate isn't like a 5-meter channel behind. Like, you don't have to enter like the highway of the ruck in order to get to it. We just have to enter those 2 points through that side. It does become in a wide portion, it becomes very challenging, especially if you have athletes who aren't very familiar with like what they're supposed to do, or with contact, or if they're not used to happens if stuff goes wrong, right? So if this defender ends up making a dominant tackle on the ball carrier, then that guy's that ladder, the inside support's path towards the ruck is just ruined. Like, there's no good way to do it, and they have to have the athleticism to back up, re-reel, get through the gate and get through onside. Same with the outside support as well. There isn't really a good fix. If you know, please let me know. I don't have one. Reps, comp, meaningful minutes, I guess, are the only ones that teach people that.
Thanks, Ryan. So another question about the system with pods of 2. So I think our 2 or anything involving 2 is really, how do you ensure there are always 2 support players with the ball carrier in that situation? Is a back or center always looking to join there? Yeah,
you kind of got to the answer on your own, where like, we're always looking to add those backs in. There's not really a good rule of any kind of like rule structure for that kind of support play. It's really just the 2 closest people, right? So if you have 3 backs who all kind of functions as 10s, right, and we're just looking for primary ball carriers, then a 2-2-2, that pods of 2 system can really function really well, because they have good communication, they have good rugby IQ, and they know where they are. It's a lot of inside support slams, and then we figure out whether we need that third person. It's not meant for like, high school or like entry level rugby. It's really meant for that high level understanding, because it takes a lot of just quick decision making in order to make those support lines work.
Yeah, thanks. And then another question about the backs. So
okay,
how or where would the back set up amongst those pods?
Can
you maybe speak to how you would add those in?
Yeah. Where are they set up? That's a good point. I probably should put that in a slide, eh? The full setup would have been very useful. Yeah, they're all in. So we got 10 and 12 in the middle of the field, 14 and 14, 11 on either side. If I go to here, and then we try to dangle this a little bit. So we got 10 and 12.
Touch on more of that. We can always come back to some more.
Yeah, sorry, I'll make one and then we'll come back to it at the end. Sorry, that's a very good idea. 100%. Park it. Come back.
Maybe related though, that you could touch on. Is there a preferred shape that works best off of the 10? Off
10. They all work off 10, surprisingly, right? So if we just end up replacing this 10 here, and we put we'll do this with the vanish. No, we'll do drawing. So we'll put the 10 here instead, right? And this becomes a 12, right? And then the 13's out wide, right? So all of them work off 10. All we do is just end up pushing that bucket player in one slot. So we end up going, the 10 is going against the attacking player. The 10 is going against the attacking third. So this angle here is what we're looking for. And then these guys all push out one person. Right. So if we were to, I'll make 2 of those as well, because now that got me excited about that. So we'll be able to make sure that point gets across. But they're pretty interchangeable for what's most effective off 10 to actually answer your question. Like I find a wider one works most effectively. The least the more conservative one is obviously the arrowhead or the skewed arrowhead, because it gives us a little bit more time for that decision maker and for that support player to make that inside decision a little bit better, right? So we're entering the ruck legally, we're doing all that good stuff. Then in terms of that's obviously the most effective, but all of these work, right? So like a stack can work really well off 10 because the opposing team will have to pick where to interject their defenders. And that's the same thing, right? Where 9 pretty much becomes 10, 10 becomes that 12 in this scenario, right? And we make that pull pass still available, but still attacking at speed and then at length, right? Because in a linear pod, it's very easier. Sorry, in a wide pod is what I meant. Ignore whatever I'm doing. So in a wide pod, it's very easy to just slot that in and put that 12 behind, right? So that 10 becomes right here, that 12 ends up here, and then we have the 13 here again, right? And we're all attacking forward and we're all making sure we're going, right? And we can attack all that and press to the line as well.
Is there a recommended pod or shape for U16s and below? I think you touched on this a bit, but
yeah, for
them.
sure. I think this is the 4-4 for like introduction to rugby is the simplest. It's easy to get around your head around it. And then the 1-3-3-1 I've found with some athletes is very accessible, where they know that 2 people who are fast are out wide, and then the 6 people who are less fast are in the middle, but no less important. And then they get their role of hammering up the middle of the field. And you kind of just get to pick between them, right? And then naturally, if you use those shapes, if you use those the pod shapes to implement a 4-4, you'll have one person sticking out, right? So if they naturally know, oh, they're not needed because we only need 2 in a ruck in theory, then we can bump out wide, and some of the athletes will naturally get to that progression. We started at 1U18 group. We started 4-4, but by the end we were transitioned to 1-3-3-1 because the athletes were effective at their clear out and they were effective at the breakdown decision making.
Is there a time, or maybe could you speak to how you might switch this within a game or within a season? You kind of touched on there, but you've got, if say your starting group are playing one system and you put some subs in, would you have to change that, or how would that work?
Interesting. I'm not sure. I've only ever done like during a game. So you can kind of like depends on the personnel, just to build on that suggestion, right? If your personnel changes as you come through, you really make sure that you're able to still implement those organizational shapes, I should say, but also keep that lane and keep that efficiency intact. There's a lot of situations where you may not want forwards doing certain things, and then like place on the field as well also can change it, right? So as we get closer to the opposition line, you might want to shift to a 4-4 or a 1-3-3-1 that's a little bit easier but closer to your own. And then once again, as you get closer to your own goal line, it might be simpler to do 4-4 to secure ball and to guarantee ruck speed. And then in the middle of the field, you do something cool like the pods of 2 involved, or maybe a 2-4-2 if you want a little bit more interchange, because that's really effective for attacking the middle of the field and keeping those wingers behind the 22, which they now have to be.
And would you be making that change or communicating that in, or would leaders on the team be able to make that change?
Oh, it'd be lovely if the game drivers could do that. That would be excellent. If we coach properly and everything lines up and the stars all come in one straight line, then the leaders on the field can lead the players that they're in charge of. That would be excellent, actually. I'd say yes. To answer it shortly.
Ideal situation, yeah.
Yeah. If everything goes perfectly according to plan, if you coached really well the entire season, then anytime you can just kind of mold in between them.
Yeah. Another question here: would the pods ever loop around another pod? Right? Would you keep going flow side, or is that more old school?
It's definitely old school. And there's definitely reasons. Like, so those linear pods are really good at that. These linear pods are really good because then we don't have to get that width as much. We can really focus on getting that point of attack and then filling in the support ones afterwards. There's a lot of good structure in that kind of play, but sending forwards around continuously is like a little bit inefficient. And if if you want your athletes to win that one-on-ones, they got to have as much energy as they can. And sending forwards around to do the grunt work and just like make them ruck all the time is just going to make them tiring and probably less efficient at set piece as well. So to try and converge and to try to make it a little bit easier, right? We try and make those like keep them in their lanes almost, right? If we designed lanes like so they can keep coming back and forth. And so the backs can do the same kind of thing, but put those 10s and 12s with a pod at a low level in case, and then try to unlock that 13 and give that 13 and 15 like free roam on splitting the field. Yeah, that's for like super defined structures though.
This is sort of a similar question you answered about U16. Now wondering about a squad of new players, maybe U12 or U14, like very new, who are still learning about the game, but looking for some easy to grasp attack shapes. Any insight, whether it's this or sort of across our full 15? What are some ways you might introduce attacking shape to like brand new?
Yeah, for brand new kids, it's always difficult. There's so much they have to learn to make them safe on the field, let alone how to attack efficiently and effectively. But it's mainly that 4-4, just to give them enough time with the ball and with decision making and to find a space on the field. And to implement that, they're not the easiest one to grasp is the main support inside outside. I found that's the one that kind of clicks the easiest for them. They don't really try and do anything. They do a lot of back and side, which is, hilarious, but U16 is U16 or U14 in that case, even more. But for U12 and U14, like the priority of my training would be on basic skills, not necessarily attacking shape. There's really not a good, I don't think they're all at the level to maybe ascertain what they're supposed to do, and the decision making is quite low. But they still have the opportunity to play that kind of rugby, right? And if they're really keen to do it, if they have a lot of time with them, then it could probably be really effective. Especially if you constantly have lead inside outside, you'll probably secure all of your ball, which seems to be the hardest part of U12 and U14 rugby.
Is there a link between attacking pod shapes and defensive alignment? I think you kind of touched on a few pieces there, but do you want to?
How so?
Arjun, have any?
Arjun, you want to elaborate? It's really interesting.
Maybe while we're thinking on that one, another question from Aaron: what shapes are some of the top universities implementing, men or women?
Most of them are in 1-3-3-1. I know some West Coast teams are doing a lot of pretty effective 4-4 splits, where they're just letting their forwards just run as hard as they can downhill, and then just playing some pretty simple backs rugby off of that. But it was really effective because you hit gain line and you have guaranteed support. So you retain ball, you retain go forward, and you create like quick ball, like less than 3-second rucks, which really puts the defense on the back foot and really puts the pressure on them to realign quickly. And then first interesting Canadian shapes. There's some like pods of 2 that happen. Some lower Ontario men's teams use that. And it really creates an interesting attacking platform for if they have really explosive wingers, then they can really manipulate that field really well, or if they have a really good 10.
Right. Well, nothing further there. So maybe, Sean, maybe we'll switch over to you now. We'll talk about some of the implementation here. And then if you've got more questions, like keep them coming, and we'll come back to questions at the end here, and we can put it all together.
Stop sharing. I did my job. Well done.
Did your job.
Is that coming through okay?
Yeah. You've got your full thing there, so I don't know if you want to throw it into a slideshow.
I do. There we go. Slideshow. Wait for start.
Perfect.
Move this guy out of the way. Awesome. So yeah, great job, Ryan. It was insightful. I took my notes too. So yeah,
Thanks,
for
Sean.
me, I'm kind of approaching this through the perspective of how to plan, execute, and then kind of tinker and adjusting. So using kind of myself and my experiences as an example, and kind of outlining it that way. So here we go. So in terms of an overview, again, I kind of just put myself in everybody's shoes, I guess, and kind of thinking through things. So for me, it's okay, where to begin? Principles of attack, which I think are really important. Looking at core skills. I mean, I think that those 2 points for me are kind of where a lot of the discussion begins and ends in terms of how that sets the foundation for anything else you're going to consider. Then we were looking at what problems we're going to consider, and then getting into what it actually looks like when we get onto the field in a training session. So I've pulled some examples again from some of the programs I'm worked with, and then how we kind of take that information and then build a session to get there. So starting with where to begin, these are kind of the questions that I asked myself, and I know Ryan covered a lot of it in his section as well. But I think when you're talking about team attack, the first thing you got to do is sort of profile your team to understand the strengths and weaknesses. So like Ryan highlighted the various strengths and weaknesses of the different shapes and structures. It's what one complements your team the best and highlights its strengths and kind of disguises its weaknesses or plays away from them. You also want to consider your positional strengths. So understanding, where your point of difference players are and how you're going to get to them. Do you have a really big tight five so you can be really confrontational through the middle of the field? Do you have some really, some wingers with X factor and you want to get that ball wide as often as possible to let them do their thing? And understanding, again, which shapes kind of allow you to play to those strengths. And then understanding critical roles. So obviously 9, 10, 12, some of your tight five as well, understanding the players you have in those positions and what they're able to do is really important. I think once you've done that and kind of profiled your team, you can kind of then do a gap analysis. And that's just kind of a fancy way of saying, okay, where are you now? And I think that team profile gives you that. And then where do you want to be? So being realistic about, understanding how many sessions you have with your players, the frequency, the duration, age group, all those factors. What's a realistic target? And I think it's okay to be ambitious with that target, right? You want to stretch the players and yourself as a coach. But I think putting that down is really important because then that kind of gives you a roadmap of how you're going to get there and really lets you kind of create that session plan, hopefully that season training plan that just lets you have that ability to check in over the season and see, are you on track? Are you further ahead? Are you behind? Are there areas you thought were going to be, take forever and they came on really quick and vice versa? So I think that's really important. And then again, the next piece is foundational principles, and I'll talk more about this on the next slide. But I think for me, this is so important because I think having that strong foundation in place really creates common understanding. And like Ryan said, that's what allows you as a team to function most effectively when players are looking up at the defense and seeing the same problem. I think that's what allows creativity. That's what allows execution. That's what allows a ton of things to come. And I think the simpler you make those kind of underlying principles, the stronger your foundation to build on is going to be. And once you have that foundation in place, I mean, for me, it's all about core skills. Like shape is about how you express your skills. And if you don't have the skills to express in the first place, then I think you kind of got to take a step back and really look to hammer the details there. I think most people are, especially in modern rugby, all skills for all players. How you prioritize those skills amongst players is up for you as a coach to determine. But I think if you have a team that has a universal skill set or relatively so, that just puts you in a position to be really flexible and really fluid in solving the problems that defenses are gonna pose to you. And I think for me, when you have those two things in place, then that gets to tactical execution. So here, that's kind of my pyramid, right? So you have the foundational principles at the bottom, your skills on top. And when you've got a good and strong understanding of those two things, now you can really start looking at tactics and really start looking at how you're going to break down games and kind of put that twist on things. So principles of attack. So I've just listed a couple here. I mean, these are pretty universal, whether you're playing attack, defense, go forward, stay connected, continuity, dominate at the point of contact, playing to space. They're all pretty universal in general, but I think they're so important in really, again, solidifying that common understanding amongst teams and amongst players. And again, if you go back to starting with profiling your team, once you create that profile, you can then kind of identify which of these principles resonate with your team the most. Again, if you're a big team, big tight five, big centers that like to run hard, go forward and dominate the point of contact might be the two principles that you really hammer home and kind of permeate through all your training sessions and really draw everything back to. If you're a smaller team that looks to play through seams and in and around edges, then staying connected and continuity might be, and playing to space might be the themes that really that you drive through training sessions and through game review and preview. Again, all of them are super important. You should always be striving for it, but it's all about investing time into specific areas and what's going to get the most return for your team. So, and for me, I think the way I think of rugby and the way I kind of summarize it, it's about managing pressure on both attack and defense. Which team can most effectively manage pressure is typically going to be the one that wins. And I think especially as you get into higher levels and the pressure becomes higher and higher, having that really simple foundation that you can come back to. So, when you're an athlete and you're in an uncomfortable position, you're not having to think through all the nuanced attack briefs and sessions and designs and all that thing. You can just think back to, again, these basic principles. And again, that's going to kind of lead you to the right conclusion anyways. The other piece I've highlighted here on the side is the 2 cubed. Ryan, I know you called it the 2-2-2. I think for me as a coach, this was kind of a huge light bulb moment for me. And the first time I heard it was Stu Edwards, who's the Scotland U18 attack coach, came over, and that was the first time I'd heard it, and it really kind of just clicked. Like it's so simple and it's so effective, and it really unlocks a lot for your attack. And I'll just go through it again quickly here. I know Ryan touched on it, but again, it's just creating different problems for the defense to solve now. So ensuring that there's, from any phase or any position, you can attack for both sides of the ball. You have 2 options to attack to, or 2 options to pass, and you have 2 layers of attack. I think as you peel away some of those 2s, it becomes very one-dimensional. So when you're talking about a one-off strike runner as a defense, you're really not posing much of a threat to them. Now you put in, an attack on both sides of the ball. Okay, now the defense has to think a little bit. Now you have 2 runners there. Okay, you're going to create hopefully some miscommunication or some misunderstanding among the defense in terms of who's taking who. And now if you add the option to play out the back, well, now you're asking a lot of the defense in various scenarios to come up and play through. And I think all of these pictures here are expressed through all of the different shapes and structures that we've talked about. But I think just that simple 2 cubed, if you can really resonate that with players, then they're always looking for it. Okay, is there 2 sides of the ball that we can attack on? Okay, no, I got to flow to the open side, or I got to stay on the short side. Is there 2 options to pass to? Nope, I got to stay here. Is there 2 layers of attack? Nope. Okay, I got to get connected to the pod in front of me. And just through doing that, they'll find their shape. And maybe it's not their exact shape, but at least it's a shape to play out of. And now they can attack from there. The piece I put at the bottom too, and I think why principles are so important, is it helps players understand the why. I think if you can root attack in the why and have that common understanding, it's just such a powerful tool, because now we all see the same problem in front of us. We all understand why we're trying to do something. And Ryan might tackle that problem in one way, and I might tackle that problem in another way. But as long as we arrive at the same conclusion, then we're going forward and good things are happening. And I think it allows us to get away from sort of that robotic rugby that at times people can connect to shape and structure and things like that, and really just open the game up and allow for that creativity and that spontaneity and players just playing what's in front of them. Because again, it might not be the exact structure that we've outlined or the running lines, etc., but we're still getting to that's common conclusion. And again, I think once we've kind of established those foundational principles and really have that firmly rooted in our team and understand that why, then again, it really comes down to the core skills. If you don't have the skills to execute, then again, shape and structure is kind of, for me, something that's aspirational. And I think this is where we spend a lot of time. And even in environments where there's good core skill and there's the requisite level, I think core skills can never be sharp enough, and really just allows us to be even more effective in accomplishing what we're trying to do. And I've listed some, catch, pass, running lines, footwork, breakdown, aerial skills, kicking, scanning. All of these, in my opinion, and so many more are foundational in actually allowing us to play the game. I think what happens though sometimes is, as coaches, and I'm super guilty of this myself, is you kind of think about these skills in isolation and you practice them in sort of isolation, when really in a game, they're all interconnected, and every single one of these, or 9 out of 10 of these, are happening all at the same time. You're catching to then pass, and you're running a line while you're doing it. So you got to use good footwork, and a breakdown's about to happen. And so it's this multifaceted approach that I think we lose a little bit. There's certainly an advantage in training these skills in isolation to really break down the details and the nuances and identify those KPIs and build players up that way. But I think at the same time, it's about finding that balance of creating drills and games and sessions where we're in the mud a little bit. Like, it's not neat, it's not perfect, it's not just a static, 2v1 that's easy to execute. We're creating a context, like I have there, that's really reflective of the game we're trying to play, the system we're trying to play, the structure we're trying to play. And so I think context is really important. So setting up, again, games and drills and things like that, so that the context is reflective of the shape you're trying to play, so that they're taking the ball from an angle that they'll actually see in the game. So if it's catch pass you're working on, maybe they're taking that first receiver's taking a couple flat balls, maybe they're taking a couple that are coming as if it's a pull pass, just to kind of replicate that picture they're going to see in a game, and create that comfort in executing that skill. I think once you've got the context right, it then becomes about pressure. So dialing pressure up and dialing pressure down throughout a session, to, again, allow that player to execute it under varying degrees of pressure and build that confidence, build that skill set, and build that ability. And I think once you've found that sweet spot of context and pressure, then it's all about repetitions, and it's about allowing them to explore that space again and again and again and again. And I think it's about creating a safe space in training where they can explore those different options and not, again, just be robotic and one-dimensional in catch, pass, catch, pass, catch, pass. Let's use a little bit of footwork. Let's run a different line here. Let's try different things and explore that space, because not all 3-on-2s are created equal, and very seldom are you going to have the same spacing and the same width and the same mismatch in front of you. So I think the more you can build that, I'll call it like a photo album in your mind of the different pictures in front of you, then the easier it is to recall in a game, oh, okay, this worked pretty well last time, or this worked really well in training. And it's not something that you actually give that much active thought to, but again, through repetitions, it's just muscle memory, and it's just something that they can kind of execute on the spot. But again, it's through getting those repetitions in. So again, once you have kind of the foundational principles down and core skills, I think this is just something I've kind of thrown down in terms of things to consider. And for me, I'm just going to shift this guy over. So things to consider. So I think when you're talking about attack, you always got to think about defense too. I think you can't think about it in isolation. You always have to consider why you're attacking and what it does to the defense. If you're not effectively manipulating the defense, then it's just kind of wasted ammunition. It's not as efficient. And I think, again, it's about who can manage pressure most efficiently and most effectively over a game. So you definitely don't want to spend too much time considering the defense. You don't want them to dictate your attack, but you definitely want to consider the problems they're going to pose and be proactive in how you're going to address them. So thinking traditionally in your league or in your environment, do they defend outside in or inside out? How do they typically fold around different areas of the field? Do they tend to put pressure on the breakdown, or do they leave the breakdown to get more width on defense and bring line speed? What does their backfield look like? Like, all different things to consider. And certainly at different levels of the game, these are different problems that you'll think about. But again, I think for me, it's always good to start on that side of the ball, just to think about why we're trying to attack and what we're trying to do. Some other pieces to obviously consider in your attack is set piece, open play, and transition. Those for me are kind of the big three in attack. And again, each of those three pose different problems and different challenges. Set piece is really cool and creative because it kind of gives you certainty in where the bad guys are going to be. And you can kind of pretty well map out where they're going to be within 1 or 2 phases of any set piece, depending on what you run. So it's a cool challenge and something, it's a nice exercise to kind of explore the different moves you have off your launch to kind of discombobulate the defense as best as possible to give you that best picture or that best mismatch 1, 2, 3 phases after a launch. Open play as well. That's something I think we're talking about a lot more today. And then transition too, super dynamic, right? Different areas of the field and where you're receiving the ball from, and what pictures that creates outfield. One of the most exciting things for me, I think, is the new goal line dropout. I think we've seen some countries really and professional outfits really take advantage of that. I think Australia's done a good job in terms of like the certainty it provides you and how you can map out of a few phases off that goal line dropout and how it kind of gives you a get it out of jail free card in certain areas of the field. I think it's still kind of on the cutting edge of things. I think there's a lot of teams that are certainly exploring it, but I'm excited to see the direction that goes in. And I think it creates a lot of really cool attacking opportunities and platforms in the modern game. Gain line and ball speed, I think, to me are the two biggest ones. I mean, that to me is how you score and how you attack effectively. It's all about gain line. It's all about ball speed, because those are really the two biggest influences you have on the defense. If you're not getting gain line and if it's slow ball, it's really, really easy to defend you. It doesn't matter, what you have at your disposal. You have to get gain line, you have to get ball speed. So these two for me are kind of where I also start with my attack, is what's the best shape that's going to allow me to get gain line most consistently and going to allow me to get that sub 3 second ball speed coming out of the breakdown. The other piece I've kind of put together here as well is, so on the right side of the screen, you kind of see the field map. And I think it's pretty common for teams to kind of identify different zones of play. So, inside your own 22-ish, your green zone, you want to get out of there. You don't really want to attack too much in there. You can probe the defense a little bit, but really you want to kind of drive the ball downfield. The other two zones are kind of where you want to play more of that attacking brand, obviously with the red zone being, that's where you're getting your points. You want to be as efficient in the red zone as possible, and doing the right work in that kind of orange zone to set yourself up for success. And for me, I think it gives you a lot of, again, depending on where you're at, the program you're working with, the teams you're working with, this is maybe a bit further, but I think having this common understanding with your team about where you want to play on the field, how you want to play there, and why you're playing there is really important and really effective, because again, it just gives them that common understanding of what they're doing, what their goals and objectives are. And then with that in mind, they can collectively figure out how they're going to accomplish that. One thing or a couple of things to consider in doing that is generating speed into and out of the various zones on the field. So you can certainly spread out the field vertically, but then also horizontally as well. And so these are typically called landmarks. They're pretty often associated with different shapes and structures and things like that. And like Ryan touched on in his presentation, that's kind of where you deploy your forwards and the channels through which they play. What I mean when I say generating speed into and out of the various zones in the field is you want to play a shape and a structure that allows you to, when you get to the edge, you're getting that line break. You're getting that, you're putting that pressure on the defense, because when you're playing through the middle of the field, it's really easy to ask questions of the defense because you naturally have two sides to attack through, and you can kind of achieve that 2 cubed, like we touched on earlier. When you get into the wider channels, though, that becomes a bit more of a problem, especially if you land further outside, kind of in that 5 meter. Now you really effectively only have one direction to attack. So if you're not generating speed into that zone and you're not getting that line break and quick ball coming back the other way, it's really easy for the defense to fire up the line and really kill the options, the attacking options in front of them. So again, I think one thing you want to consider when you're creating attack is how can you most efficiently get that gain line on the edges and generate speed playing into that zone, and then also coming back out of that zone, because it's all well and good to get a big line break, but if it's not quick ball, then you're just giving the defense time to reset, and then you're kind of have that same problem attacking back out of that wide channel. So again, that's kind of a problem to consider. And then the last piece too is conditioning the opposition. I think that's kind of the fun part of attack too, is how do you consistently paint a picture to sell the impression to the defense so that that's what they're honed in on, And then you kind of come out and surprise them with something new, right? It's like in a fight, if you're constantly throwing a jab and then, coming with an uppercut, just catch them off guard. I don't fight much, but I watch some UFC, so that's the extent of my experience. But again, that's kind of the link I draw. So this is, again, talking kind of about my experience. I took this from this was our training camp presentation. So this was a look at last year, so 2021 season at a glance, on attack. So again, understanding that different levels, different coaches on here have access to different resources and things like that. You have to kind of take this with a grain of salt, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of kind of low-hanging fruits and easy ways to accomplish things if you just think slightly outside the box. So this content here is what we use to kind of create our attack going into this year, understanding our strengths and weaknesses from the year before, what we wanted to highlight, what we wanted to change, and how we wanted to move forward on that. For us, looking at 2021, we saw that a large portion of our tries came off of turnovers. We were a pretty opportunistic team, and really did well in that regard. An area that we weren't very happy with was our lineout success. We didn't find much success with lineouts being our point of origin. So that was a big work on for us this year. But again, these were kind of things that we looked at to understand how we wanted to develop our game. Now, we're obviously fortunate in the OUA that we have a third party who we film the games, and we have a third party who kind of codes it and breaks down the game for us. But even at the local club level, I think there's a lot of opportunities. I mean, whether it's your phone, your iPad, even a camera, you certainly don't have to go into as much detail because it does take a long time to code and break things down, but a little does go a long way. So even if it's filming your game, and then just looking at source of origin for your tries, and then having that discussion with your team and making them aware of it so that you can kind of understand what your strengths and weaknesses are as a team. And the proof sort of in the pudding with that regard. You can also look at things like penalties and turnovers. Lineout success and scrum success is an easy one to measure if you just have your clipboard with you on the sideline and you're taking note at each set piece. And again, that's a good indication of how you can manage and adjust your attacking philosophy, shape, identity in season as you progress. This here is another slide I lifted from our preseason. So this was 2021 preseason. So this year we played a 1-3-3-1. It was really, again, highlighted the strengths of our team. We had a pretty dense tight five, and we were able to get some really good go forward ball there. And then we had some loose forwards who were fast and handy and were able to play effectively in those wide channels. And this simply is how we introduced the shape to our team. It's what was the purpose of shape? How do we find shape, and how do we keep shape? That's what we rolled out to players at the beginning of training camp and really tried to hammer home throughout. For us, we felt that if players could effectively answer these questions, then in a game, they're going to do all right in playing to that shape. So for us, the common understanding, the why do we play a shape? It's to create mismatches. It's to put bad guys in spaces that they're not comfortable defending, and put them in spaces where we're really comfortable attacking. So having that common understanding, and like Ryan said in his portion, it's not that robotic, we're going to score a try off of every piece. We're creating that mismatch so that we can just play rugby at that point. We can just play that 3-on-2 that's in front of us and hopefully find success there. The question, how do we find shape? So things we had to consider was how do we find shape off of set piece? How do we find it in transition? And then how do we find it in restarts? So that's something that we kind of built throughout the season. And I don't think there's any right or wrong answers to that. Again, it depends on your team, your profile, and how you can most effectively do that. But again, I think just having the understanding, okay, yeah, in a set piece, we have to find our shape. If somebody turns the ball over in the middle of the field and now we're attacking, how do we effectively find our shape? And for us, the biggest tool we used was those landmarks, which I touched on earlier, which for us was the 15-meter channels and then sort of a line straight through the middle of the field. And then last was how do we keep shape? So we keep our shape off of 9 and 10 and staying connected through the middle of the field. So we have various options to play through, which is important. So I've got 2 video clips here. This is from our 2021 season. Brock in red, Western in purple. So what I thought was cool about these 2 videos, and I'll play them in a second, is that they're virtually identical. 2 launches from the exact same spot on the field with a lot of the same personnel in both. So I'll start with I'll say good one, not great, but good. So here we're playing out of the 15-meter channel, and we get 1 hit up to get us some decent go forward ball. Out here, you see our pod sort of connecting. And what I think we do well here is our runner captures that outside shoulder. So like Ryan talked about, that was a big theme for us. We want to get that outside shoulder of the defense to force that the other defenders to fold around. What that also allows is a really good angle of entry for that inside support. It opens up the tackler to come through and really clear out that ball. Coming out the back, that really then we had some. This is played at like 0.75 speed, so I will say our guys are a little bit faster than this. But what that allows us to do is really get that fast ball through the middle, which opens up that 5-on-3 for us. I'm going to stop it there because our guy throws a terrible pass, and it does not come off. But let me go back here. So again, that play through the middle really opens up the outside for us, allows us that go forward ball. We have a player run that outside, that overline, which now gets us a 2-on-1 on the outside. It doesn't come off. He picks it up and almost goes the other way, but fortunately for us, gets tackled. So again, that just hammers home the concept of why core skills are so important. We got the picture in front of us, and unfortunately, it just didn't come off. But I think the fact that we got to that was what I was trying to highlight there. This next one is a not so great example. So here we're playing from essentially the exact same spot on the field, but you'll see our success is not as good. So here we don't get that outside shoulder. We just settle for a hard collision, which actually allows that inside defender to come up, scoop us, and now it's a really messy breakdown for us. In fact, probably a penalty against us. But again, just that shape and that fine little detail of not capturing the outside shoulder puts us under a ton of pressure now because we can't effectively enter the breakdown. We still had that same picture out wide. If we got that go forward ball, we've effectively got a 5-on-3 around the corner. But because that fine little detail doesn't come off, it's all for naught. And so again, I think for me, putting these 2 pictures in here highlights one of 2 things. First, how amazing of a tool and a resource video is. And again, understanding that people are in different kind of places and have access to different resources, but there are some really good ones available on the market. And worst case, again, even an iPhone or a camcorder at a decent height really lets you get these pictures. And I think these pictures are so great and an effective teaching tool to show players the fine little details. And that was the second point I was getting to, is in these videos highlighting those little details, because it's so easy to look at the big picture. But I think as you can shift between big picture and little picture and understand that the little things done well are what allow you to effectively do the big things great, is really important. So it's, again, that balance of core skills versus shape. I have one more video here, and this was to highlight again just the what happens through conditioning defenses. So for us, this was our game against Waterloo, and at this, up until this point in the game, I would say 90% of our balls off of 9 were tip balls. So that first receiver would get it and immediately tip it to the second receiver, who would have a go. And again, I would say 90-something% of them were that up until this point, which effectively conditioned the defense to start expecting that, start cheating, and started creating seams for guys. And I'll let that just play through. And again, in training, the reason I have this in there is in training, we really don't ever train we're gonna break in that first strike. because we know more often than not that defense is going to make that tackle. Here, though, we've done a good job in effectively conditioning that defense, and now we've created a picture that we don't train very often. So guys might be in positions where they don't know what to do when that first receiver makes a break like that. But that is where we kind of root ourselves back in our principles of stay connected and continuity. And so here I, would shout out our player of he was probably expecting that tip ball. It doesn't come. He gets through. He works real hard to get connected, fight through that defender, support the ball, good offload here. And now we're in for a try. And so again, it's painting those pictures but having everything rooted in those foundational principles. So even when something happens that we're not expecting, we can quickly tap back into stay connected, go forward, continuity. And we do that and good things happen. Just move this guy down to the bottom. So I've got here breaking down the picture. So I guess kind of transitioning and wrapping up into now how do we start training this? How do we start kind of replicating this in an actual training session? So here we've got kind of a shape that we can find ourselves in, at least in a 1-3-3-1. This is one that I'm pretty familiar with. So we've got a hit on the 15. We've got that 2 cubed. So now we've got options on both sides of the ball. We've got two passing options, and we've got 2 layers. So how do we train this? And it's about creating pictures for players. So when I say picture, it's, taking that snapshot of what's immediately in front of you. Is it a 5-on-4? Is it a 3-on-2? And how do we attack that? And so for me, I think the simplest method is understanding the shape that you're playing in. And then what are the common pictures you're going to see throughout the game? Again, the benefit of playing in a shape is that it gives some predictability, that if you hit certain landmarks with certain players, you're going to get certain results that you can then train towards. So in this situation, playing out of this shape, we train 3 different pictures in a game. So the first one would be just a simple 4v3 that we can do in a game. And that the constraint we can put on that is it's going to be a 9 pick. So the 9 is going to scoot off a breakdown and then try and create a 4v3 on this side. And we can just train that in training. And it doesn't need to be as formal as that. It can just be exposing guys to a 4v3 with that first receiver sort of scooting into the line. And that will naturally translate into this picture here. The other picture we can break down is playing through the middle of the field. So having a pod of 3 with a player at the back and a first receiver. And just training that in the game. So training that 5-on-4 and allowing players to be creative and explore that different scenario. Maybe in that first one, they run an outside in line. Maybe the next time he hits the second defender or the second receiver. Maybe the third time they go at the back. I think just creating games and drills and exercises where they can just explore these different pictures helps them translate those skills into a game. And then the last picture you could train as well is you'd slide this first receiver over, is exploring a 4-on-3 with maybe a defender scooting in the back in that space. Again, just painting that picture for your team to allow them to get those context relevant reps. And then you can apply pressure. I think it's also important you take into consideration the space that they're playing within in these pictures and trying to replicate that in your session as well. So it's not a 4-on-3 with a huge wide side. You're getting them used to playing, getting them comfortable being uncomfortable in a 4-on-3 in a 15-meter channel. You're also getting them comfortable playing a 5-on-4 with some space. So again, if we go back to kind of core skills, it's creating that context, replicating the pressure, and then just allowing them to get reps and reps and reps. And you can break down these pictures from a number of different strikes, set piece, etc. And I think that's how you kind of take that shape and pull that into a training session. And so my last slide here is session design. So this is something that I try my best to get all of these into a training session. We're fortunate enough to train with our guys 4 days a week on field for 2 hours. So we can really get a lot into it, but understanding that at club level, you're maybe seeing them twice a week, even provincial level, maybe once a week for a handful of hours. But this is what kind of an ideal training session would look like, or at least nuts and or bits and pieces of it. We start our training sessions with a skill, we call it a skill carousel. Some people call it hygiene stations or nuts and bolts. And for us, we have 3 to 4 drills that we do at the beginning of every single training session. And they're drills that we've designed to, again, they're context specific. So they're drills that we know translate directly into the game that we want to play. And we just allow guys to get reps. So they'll do a station, they'll rotate around once or twice, 3 to 4 minutes in each, and really focus on those reps. What we also try and do is let players train in the groups that they'll be in a game. So if we know that these players tend to be in a pod together, let them get reps together. If we know that players are playing in different situations, allowing them to explore that space just a little bit more so that it translates more into the game. We do a ton of gameplay. I think gameplay is super important. So we do a lot of constrained games to try and elicit those outcomes that we're trying to get. So some of the games we do is Fiji touch. So if you get a touch, you can take 2 steps, make an offload, promote continuity, particularly through our guys who play through the middle of the field, letting them break the defense and playing behind them a little bit. We play some drop touch. So drop touch is, if you make a touch, you got to drop back to the line. So again, conditioning our guys to strike through the middle of the field, to wear down the defense, to then open up that space out wide. And also just to play some heads up rugby and spot gaps in front of them. Channel ball is another game we like to play where we put players in pennies and then we tell the defense where those pennies have to stand. So sometimes we'll load up the channels with pennies. Sometimes we'll load up the midfield with pennies, and we won't tell the offense what's happening. We'll just kind of let them figure it out on their own and navigate how they should be attacking and the different strategies they should be employing based on what's in front of them. But again, there's a billion different games and so many awesome resources. The Rugby Ontario Coaches Corner has a number of them. You can go in and find them, some from the RFU, some from Rugby Australia. Good stuff there. Game zone, skill zone is something we always try and do as well. So having, while there's a game being played, having another coach off to the side running a skill zone. So really hammering home that skill that we want to then take from and parachute right into the game to hopefully improve the performance within that game. And then you just have teams rotate through, and hopefully each time they come back in, they're elevated in that area. But again, that can be difficult depending on how many coaches you have available. So if it's just you or maybe one other coach, that could be hard to manage. So that's where Whole Part Whole is a great tool as well. So having the group collectively together, training, and then breaking that down into the part, having them focus on that and then bringing them back into the game. I prefer the game zone skill zone because it just keeps things rolling. But that's another effective tool as well. And then position specific. So that's, again, within training, allowing players to work in different units. So back and forwards is the obvious one, unit groups as well. So type 5, back 3, halfbacks, etc. But then area groups as well. Thinking back to that last slide with the different pictures we broke up, letting our channel forwards get some time playing with the wingers and the centers, because we know that in a game, there's going to be a lot of interconnection between them. Letting our type 5 work with the 10 and the 12, because we know that in a game there's going to be a lot of connection between them. So creating different games and structures within the session where they get that interplay. And then obviously the last piece is the team run. So allowing some situational gameplay, letting them just navigate the field in front of them, kind of coaching on the fly in behind them, talking to your game drivers, asking them questions, pointing them in the right direction, having those discussions on the go. I find to be very helpful in kind of putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. And then the last piece is presenting the team opposition pictures. But again, depending on where you're playing, if you're at maybe a provincial championship and you've got film on the other team, you can certainly implement that. At the club level, if you played them before, that might be something that you can pull in as well. But that's to you as a coach to determine kind of the best allocation of your time and energy in a training session. And those are just the questions. But yeah, so that's kind of it. Like Ryan said, I feel like I just pushed a ton on everybody and was talking a mile a minute. So I think now's a good time for Q&A.
All right, thanks, John. Yeah, lots of information, and we've had a few questions come in. So some of them I think we've probably touched on a little bit, but Question about what might be some good options for transitioning from chaos rugby to structured play.
Yeah, so I
That's
think
the 2 cubed idea.
so like specifically like 2 cube, like how to find that shape.
That sounds like that's what he's getting at. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think what I like to do in game is have a coach, myself or somebody else, kind of in the middle driving the game, and at different points, even when it's not necessarily an actual turnover, just throwing a new ball into the game and eliminating the old ball, and just creating that kind of spontaneity and allowing players to have to read and react and adjust from attack to defense in a moment's notice, because that can certainly happen in a game. So that's one thing that we try to do a lot of, just to replicate that transition and create some chaos in the drill and kind of live in the mud, so to speak. And one of the games that we like to play a lot of, to create that 2 cubed connection is, we'll play a variation where we'll put certain players in pinnies, and the condition on the players in pinnies is that they must be attached to a player in front of them. So that forces that player to play in that second layer and get connected, which then creates 2 layers. And if you have a couple players doing that, then you'll create 2 layers on multiple sides of the ball, and you'll kind of force them to see the game through a bit of a different perspective. And you can certainly do that with your 9 or with your 10s, 12s, 15s, but sometimes it's good to put, your tight 5 in that position. And even though, in a game, they're likely not playing in that position, it now again exposes them to that perspective of, okay, I need to get connected. I need to find that. And that's kind of how we try and implement that 2 cubed in a game or in a training session.
Thanks, Sean. Ryan, did you have anything to add in there? That sort of transition chaos to structured play?
Yeah, I think that's as best as answers we're gonna get. If anyone knows exactly how to, please let everyone know, because you'll be a pretty important person in the coaching sphere if you figure that out. Because they really just have to try and get the ball away from where that turnover happened, right, and then try and set it up off of that, right. So as Sean said, introducing different variables involved will make it a little bit easier for them to train that kind of thing, to get those experiences in their minds, so that the transition from defense to attack, or transition from a kick to attack, is something they can do instinctually, and give them a little bit of a better understanding of their role when you transition roles, when you have different stuff going on. So the only real reason to train it, or the only real way to train it, is to find a constraint-based game that allows you to really accentuate that.
Awesome. We'll come back to Arjan's question about linking the attacking pod shapes with the defensive alignment. He did clarify here, sort of with a turnover, you would aspire to have an efficient transition. So having players stay close to where their new assignment is, whether that's on offense or defense. So either of you want to touch on that, how that structure might impact where you would line up on defense?
It could, if you want to make it a little bit easier for the athletes. I bet that's something you could do. I have my coaching philosophy is to have a very distinct, different defensive system than attacking system. So they have much different roles on both sides, so that they can really switch that mentality, and it makes transition ball very direct and very simple. So we're not trying to do something too complicated when the ball turns over. But in most cases, right, I got the 12 on one side, 13 on one side being the edge defenders, making sure we're capturing the forwards in the middle of the field, so we can make sure that they're not getting easy meters at the middle of the field. And then that kind of transitions into 1-3-3-1. It can, but I think in my world, and in the stuff that I am involved in, there's not really a good. They don't just like stay in those lanes for defense. They find a different role when they're going to defense, because a lot of those times it depends a lot on body composition, athleticism, cardio, a bunch of other factors. That's not really as important as their attacking position. So kind of.
Sean, anything you wanted to add there as well?
No, I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's so like condition specific sometimes, like where the ball's turned over and what area of the field, that sort of thing. So I think it's more just getting players used to the chaos and understanding that, turnovers can happen, unfortunately or fortunately at any moment. So I think the more you expose them to that in a game, the more they can kind of wrap their heads around it and start to identify it. It's tougher to make sort of hard and fast policies sometimes, but I think having that common understanding of, okay, when there is a turnover, within 1 to 2 phases, we want to get back into our either attacking or defensive shape, and what we're going to prioritize in getting there, I think is important. But that all depends again on your shapes and structures and what sort of your policies are. So I think once you define that as a team, it's then just exposing them to that situation and training consistently.
So I realize we're getting low on time here. We had sort of a question about how our back set up in relation to pods, which Sean, I think you did touch on a bit. Ryan, I don't know if you were going to add anything else to that. Anything else is needed. And then Khalil had a question as well about how do you add kicking into your attack? I know we might be opening a whole other can of worms if we want to start talking about kicking, but maybe brief thoughts. He says, when and where, any guidelines?
Yeah, for me, it's kicking's just about territory, because especially at like entry level, but as you get obviously more competitive, it changes the ideas of why to kick, but you're just gaining territory. You're sacrificing possession to put the ball closer to their goal line, and your when and where kind of decides on how your play is going, right? So if we've run 5 phases and it's not gone anywhere, you don't really have a good idea as to how you're supposed to attack. So it's better off just to pound the ball down the field, find some grass somewhere else, and let them try to attack into you if you're pretty confident you're defending. As well as if you have a really good team in transition, then kicking is a good option, because then you can try and force a turnover, and that's that kind of idea. And then, there's not really, it's a big, broad, open question, but if any Canadians figure it out, it's a big gap in our play that we all need to fix.
Kicking will have to be a topic for another webinar.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll add to that, Khalil, is just like, that's something that we build into kind of our field map. So just again, understanding areas in the field, what our objectives are, and then different ways that we can exit those areas and different kicks we look to use in those different areas. And again, depending on the level, sometimes it's maybe just you only have the opportunity to have a couple conversations. At certain levels, you're really able to dive into it more. But I think just again, having that common understanding, and probably more so with your game drivers, like the people who are making those decisions, so that there's clarity and understanding there, and then they can kind of manage the game effectively around it. So yeah, that's just what we do. We kind of build that into our field map.
Thanks. We had a smaller question, maybe, or maybe it's a bigger question about the Jersey JPEGs. Where can we get a copy of those for our own presentation? So if either of you want to send that along, we can always pass that out with our resources as well. There's always interest in extra resources like that. So we have a few other questions, but again, mindful of time, resource recommendations to continue learning. Someone stole one of my rapid fire questions, so we'll definitely include that in there. Quick thoughts from either of you.
For shapes and attacking play, now I think most of my stuff came from talking to other coaches about their experience, and then watching a lot of rugby, and then going like, oh, that's weird. And then you go to online resources, like the rugby site has like a big number of available videos, but behind a paywall is not something I normally condone. And the piracy in the coaching community isn't at all-time high just yet. So we'll have to, someone will have to bite the bullet on that one.
Yeah, I would say, I think the rugby site is a worthy investment. That's the one that I've used a lot. Yeah, just a ton of good resources there. YouTube as well. The RFU's done some really good stuff on small-sided games and constraint-based learning and things like that. So yeah, I think it's just, YouTube is awesome. You can kind of learn anything there. So exploring that and then finding those channels.
Another question here was about the typical nuts and bolts drills you run at the beginning of sessions, and probably some info on that in some of those resources as well, I would say. Right, talking to other coaches and connecting. Last piece maybe we'll end on is just your biggest piece of advice or take home message for everybody listening on attack.
I think for me, it's the 2 cubed piece. Like, I might have, like, again, I think that was just an aha moment for me. So that might just be personal experience, but I found that just really is a really simple and effective way to create common understanding amongst players. And then once you have that, you have a foundation in place to get more nuanced and start taking things in different directions. But that was something that really was kind of a game changer for me as a coach and shifting my perspective.
Yeah, then for me, it's a lot of, we can plan as much as we want, and you could make rugby as scripted as you want to believe it is. But at the end of the day, it's run forward, catch backwards, or pass backwards. So it's really important to get those basic then, as I said, like skill set is a constraint to any kind of structure we put in, right? So if we can't have a congruent or continuity based forward passing game, then there really isn't a lot in value in mapping the game in a complicated manner. And then that simple 4-4 structure might be something that you need to look into, or experiment with something else that's in between those two, right? There's 15 people on the field, you can organize them however you want, but the main key is to get them into space, allow them to use their own skill sets, and really try not to put them in a box, try to give them just an idea of what to do, and then slowly try to push and prod and poke in the right direction so that they kind of meet those ideas that you're looking for.
So thank you. So a few more questions here, but we will call it because it's 8:30. So as if you want to email them off or send them on to us, we can get to those another time, hopefully. But I'll send it over to Amanda to close us out.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ryan and Sean, for joining us tonight. From where I jumped in, I can tell it was a really good presentation, and I'm sure everyone here learned multiple new things. I can see lots of comments in the Q&A about just how awesome it was, and some of their favorite webinars so far, which is great to hear. So we're happy that you're getting a lot out of this, and that's what the goal is with these webinars, is to provide you with different insights and things like that. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight, who did join us. Our next webinar is next Monday. It's on the defensive side of the ball, so some of those questions that are probably burning from this one, you can bring over to our next one with David Butcher and Aaron Tackle, who will be leading those. And that's same time, same place, 7 p.m. Here on Zoom. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you guys next Monday. Good night.
See you guys. Thanks.